This is episode 4 of the Disruptive Love podcast, and I'm David Bennett.
And I'm Jonathan Bennett.
Today we're going to talk to Vinnie Dangerfield. I must say that is my favorite name that is not a stage name, a real life name. Right. Almost sounds like a stage name. About the importance of excellence and loving yourself and the impact this has on relationships and just on life in general. And just a reminder, Jonathan and I run the men's lifestyle blog, The Popular Man, and we also own and operate Double Trust Dating. And be sure to check out some of our books. We have 7 books related to relationships, dating, and general success.
Well, welcome, Vinnie. We're really glad to have you.
Thanks.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself? You'll do a much better job than we will.
Yeah, so Dangerfield is definitely my last name.
It really is. That's great. That's great.
Are you related to Rodney?
I'm not.
You get that all the time.
I'm sure everybody asks that
course.
question.
Yeah, I had to do some research about that, and I discovered that was his stage name.
Oh, okay.
That was his stage name.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
For him, but good for you.
Yeah, no, I love it. And then it definitely, it fits the mold as to running the obstacle courses. You know what I mean? It's like a badass name.
Yeah, that's
It
right.
is.
That's right.
Can I swear on here?
Yeah,
You just
you
did,
got
so
it.
that's okay.
Okay,
Yeah, no,
all
you
right,
can't.
all right.
You can say ass as much as you want.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so we were talking a little bit earlier, but I'm definitely from Youngstown, Ohio.
Okay.
Repping the 330. I went to school at Kent State University, where I got my bachelor's in exercise science and a minor in psychology.
Excellent.
And I was working up there in that area in northeastern Ohio for a couple years after undergrad, and wanted to switch things up. My career wasn't necessarily going where I wanted it to go, so working within the fitness and wellness industry, I was realizing that there was a disconnect between personal trainers and their clients. We weren't necessarily seeing the results that we wanted, and so there was a disconnect. And eventually, I actually we're talking about relationships and everything too. I had a separation in my relationship for 2.5 years. And at that time, I couldn't handle it, right? Like fell into total victim mode, felt like the whole world was collapsing on me. It made work that much more challenging. It was challenging at first, and it made it that much more challenging. And so I recognized I needed a change of pace. And so that led me a year later to moving down to Columbus, and that's kind of where I'm at now. So I started my own fitness and mindset coaching business.
Great.
Where we take people who have either been in athletics before or are new to the fitness and wellness realm, and basically enlighten or inspire them or awaken their inner athlete and transform their entire life.
Wow, excellent. That is a great business.
That is awesome.
Thanks.
I mean, we wore our Tough Mudder shirts.
Yep.
We're going to be doing the Tough Mudder this weekend.
Yeah.
And we truly do believe that everyone has an athlete within them, and I know this is a relationship podcast, so we are going to get to that, of course. But what we focus on is this idea, and you mentioned it to a degree, that you didn't feel like you were ready for this relationship. And then you worked on yourself and you were ready. And clearly, just by looking at you and by your accomplishments, you've pursued excellence a lot. What event was there, if there was one, that triggered this for you? A lot of people can speak of something that made them want to get super ripped or pursue this path in life. Why don't you tell us about yours?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It really all started with me being in martial arts at the age of 5, and aspiring to be a Power Ranger.
Okay.
It's a good goal.
Yeah, of course, right? Wanted to be a superhero. And I think just from that training alone, it teaches self-discipline, self-respect, that sort of thing. And using that to leverage any other sport that I went into. So it was just basically setting the foundation on building excellence in every other domain of my life. So I was able to easily transition into playing baseball with agility and speed and that sort of thing, and then being able to take on wrestling or track or rugby later on in undergrad, and then even got into bodybuilding, a little bit of bodybuilding.
Wow.
And then after that, I was like, all right, cool. I still want some competitive drive, and that's where I got into the obstacle course racing. But truly living in excellence, I guess for me, I would love to define that first.
Yep.
Because it's different for everybody. So living in excellence for me is basically not settling for mediocrity, right? And I see mediocrity as like complacency of like, oh, I'm fine.
Yeah.
You know, like I've got it. I'm good, you know, and not necessarily being open to feedback or seeing that there is even room to grow, right? Like I think of that also as a lack of humility as well, of thinking like, oh, I'm at the top, right? Like, because we can always grow and progress. So I think excellence isn't necessarily an endpoint, but more or less like a journey. So that's kind of where I see, you know, my personal health. And then recognizing too that if I'm not creating the results that I want in my life, then I need to shift something and reevaluate and redesign and reinvent myself somehow, some way. And that's kind of where that whole, going back to the relationship and the career that I was in at that time, I was recognizing that I wasn't producing the results. And like, I could totally blame every single person, you know, of course,
right.
in those scenarios, right? But that's not necessarily, again, living in excellence. Like, living in excellence to me is taking responsibility. So I chose to be responsible and sit back and say, okay, cool, what's working, right? So yes, of course, I can produce health and wellness in my life, but why am I so angry, right? Like I started noticing that I was very angry in my relationships, even at work, right? Like I wasn't, I was very judgmental, or I was also very quick to defend myself, right? And that was coming from like a place of anger, because I didn't want to be made wrong, right? As opposed to like, oh, okay, cool, like thank you, I didn't notice that, right? And being open and responsive to whatever they were telling me, I was more or less trying to keep them at bay. And that was absolutely what was showing up in my relationships, my family, my intimate relationships, and even with my friends, like friends that I had had for years, 10 years plus, like they would piss me off, sort of thing. And I'd be like, okay, yeah, cool, you're done. I would completely erase them because I took it personally. And so that was when I started realizing, like, do I really want this life that I'm creating? Like, am I truly living in excellence, right? I tell all my clients at the time to, oh, well, you've got to do this to, you know, lose body weight and, you know, do this if you want more energy, all this stuff, right? But recognizing that your health and wellness just isn't one centrally focused pillar, right? It's like everything, right? Like wellness is, you know, some people define it as like 8 pillars, 6, whatever the case is, but really every domain of your life is influenced by your internal relationship.
Is that what you do then as a kind of a mindset coach? You kind of
100%.
combine the two, where you kind of, you're changing your mind in a way to help change your body.
Yeah,
Is that what
100%,
you're doing?
100%.
So what do you do then? Like like what mindset would you recommend someone take? Let's go back to the way you were. Like, let's say, you know, a lot of people don't like feedback. You know, and we find that a lot of what keeps a lot of people from being excellent is
what keeps them single.
What keeps them
from
single?
the perspective we come from.
Is that they literally they don't like any kind of feedback.
Right.
Even if it's proven and they've seen evidence, they just don't like it. You know, so the same with, I'm sure, you know, starting a diet is always a big joke. You start a diet, you start an exercise plan, you're done within a week, right?
Right.
So what mindset should you have to overcome some of that?
I think it's like a twofold thing. So choosing neutrality.
Okay.
So coming from a place of neutrality. So again, going back to like where I was at before, I was doing a lot of the things that I wanted to like prove myself, right? And get positive feedback, right? Like I was proving myself in my physique, in my relationships to like get something out from somebody else, right? Approval.
Like praise and approval.
Yeah,
Okay, I see.
Exactly.
I see.
And so in the sense of like feedback, which it sounds like you guys are talking about with some of your clients and your audience, that they only want the praise, and then they're not necessarily looking for the deep, honest truths. And
even we deliver it as nice as possible. Right? You know, that's the thing. Yeah,
and that was where I was coming from, is that I didn't want to hear the BS, you know, the BS, right? Because here's the thing is, again, I wasn't taking responsibility. If I look back at it, right? Like, I'll take responsibility when I'm in the limelight and I look good and, you know, I can produce these results for my clients, sort of thing. But if there's something negative, right, then, oh, well, that's not my fault.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I would recommend, with a mindset shift, stepping into neutrality and looking at feedback, like anything in our environment, as just totally neutral. Of like, okay, cool, is this working or not working? As opposed to I'm being like a victim to the results. Because again, if I choose that, then that's not being responsible. Because if I choose responsibility, that means I can do something about it. I can respond. I'm able to respond. Responsible. I'm able to respond in that situation, and then make a difference. You know. And then the second piece is seeing feedback as also a gift.
Oh, excellent. Good, interesting
That
point.
is-
Yeah,
that is awesome.
Yeah.
So like, the mindset shift is more or less gratitude. Falling back into gratitude, and that kind of goes back into even how I recognized gratitude at first, was when my grandmother passed away 4 years ago. She suffered from diabetes, and she had a quadruple bypass. She was on dialysis 3 times a week for 7 years approximately, and she suffered several mini strokes up until her passing. And again, at that moment, right, I fell into like, wow, my world is crashing down on me, like total victim, like what can I do about this? As opposed to saying and looking at it now as that's a total gift. Like my grandmother's passing was a piece of feedback as to what wasn't working in her life.
Interesting.
And okay, cool, I have this information now, and it's just information coming from a place of total neutrality and saying, okay, cool, what can I do about it? And that's what inspired me then to go deeper into the health and wellness realm, right? And so that's really where I coach my clients, and even family, friends, you know, like we talk about it, you know, and so we talk about looking at things from a total neutral place of not taking it personally, you know, and then falling back into like massive gratitude and recognizing that anything and everything that we're experiencing is a total gift.
Yep.
And when, you know, if, for example, my grandmother, you know, we would tell her all the time, like, Grandma, you got to run, you got to do this, you're doing this wrong, like whatever, right? As opposed to taking it personally, like she could have done something different about it, you know, even just a little bit, you know, choosing to eat a salad, you know, like that sort of thing. And so now that's what I use for my clients, because again, like it sounds like also too what you guys are talking about is if you're receiving feedback, you know, in a relationship, in your health, whatever it is if you don't do anything about it, then you're never going to change, and you're never going to be able to live in that level of excellence. That's
Right.
like, again, that level of mediocrity.
Yeah, we had a guy message us once. He was desperate for a date, and he asked what he could do, and we messaged him about 5 or 6 things he could do, and his comment was, well, I can't do that, that's too hard. So he saw what would help him get dates, but he refused to accept it.
Yeah.
And it's a good tie into our question, what you mentioned about mediocrity. I mean, you've, I'm sure, worked with a lot of people who weren't truly motivated, or who were happy, even though they said they might want to change, they were probably really staying the same, and they knew they were going to stay there.
Yeah.
Why do you think, since you've been around this, people just default to this mediocrity? I mean, you know there's these tips that can take them to this other level, but yet they stay put, even though they know they'd be happy.
And they desperately want that.
Yeah, they desperately
They
want
seem
it.
to, at least. Yeah.
And they probably do desperately
Yeah.
want it.
Right.
Why do you think they stick to mediocrity?
So if we redefine, even not redefine it, but if we look at mediocrity also as comfort, right? Because it's like, oh, I'm comfortable, I'm gonna hang out on my couch, I'm not gonna really do anything, I'm gonna put my feet up and watch Netflix, right? Like that's comfort, right? That's not necessarily doing anything, you know. So what it sounds like from that experience of what you're sharing with me, and also what I see a lot of, is that fear is like the blanket that you wear in your comfort zone.
Oh, good way to put it.
That is a great way to put
we'll
it.
remember that one.
So this isn't my acronym, but fear is false expectations appearing real.
I think I've heard that before. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, for example, you know, you're talking even about one of the guys that messaged you, and his instant response was, oh, this is going to be hard. right?
Right.
And so that was a false expectation. He was expecting it to be hard. But again, going back to what we were talking about before, is if we look at everything from a place of neutrality, of just, okay, well, I could try that. And, that's advice, right? Like, we're always constantly giving advice, in both of our fields.
Right.
And if you try it, then, okay, it didn't work, but it's just like Michael Jordan. You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take.
Right, yes.
Right? So do you want to continue to live in mediocrity and wanting something, right? And like dreaming about your vision and dreaming about your goals and all the passions and the things that excite you, you can continuously dream about them, or are you going to like let fear hold you back? And so that's one of the big messages that we talk about when we bring up everything, is like, what are the fears? So is there fear of rejection, fear of isolation? Is there fear of being made wrong, right? Because like if you're going up to a potential partner and you're like, hey, I would love to take you on a date, they say no, then it's like, oh, well, I'm being made wrong, right? And now I'm feeling rejected, now I'm isolated because I'm alone again, right? And like all of this even shows up directly correlated even with fitness and wellness.
Well, I was even reading today a study and I'd read this before, but I just came across it today while doing some other research, that when you're rejected, the areas of your brain that experience physical pain light up, basically. So, I mean, it's almost like you are getting physically harmed when you're rejected. And I'm sure that's what we deal with a lot is putting yourself out there does mean you're also risking that rejection.
And I think fear of success. That guy who messaged us might have thought, wow, I might actually get a date.
Yeah.
And if I get a
And then
woman,
what now?
What am I going to do
now?
Yeah.
Or, I've talked
Totally.
to people who were, unhealthy and wanted to get healthy, and they actually did say, I don't know if I could handle being thin and, living life with more attention. And, I've been abused. What can I deal with guys hitting on me? I mean, even the fear of success sometimes.
But I can see why it is kind of daunting, though, because we were thinking about the things that. So we used to be heavier. I was up to 50 pounds heavier, and you were probably what, 30,
About
40?
40.
Yeah,
Wow.
and
Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
But the work that is to some degree, I will say, because people think it is a lot of work to keep what we have. I mean, we run. This is not bragging, by the way. We run almost every day. I lift weights. I go straight usually. From a day job to lift weights to work out. Then I do other work. I'm counting my calories. I'm weighing stuff. I'm drinking, I drink kale juice sometimes. That's the worst. I think that's the worst thing I've ever done taste-wise. But I do these things because the outcome is health, not necessarily because it tastes good. I don't eat the donuts that other people bring in to events, So it is work. So I can see why people say that, because it's not necessarily easy. Just like getting a date isn't necessarily easy if you're coming from a certain point. So what do you tell people that raise that objection? That it is hard. I got a lot of work to do.
Of course, it's going to be hard, right? And anything that you want outside of your comfort zone is going to be hard, right? I think you also brought up a great point, David, is that it sounds a lot like self-worth, right? So I would say, and I'm not necessarily judging my grandmother or even any of my clients, right? Like, again, it's all coming from a place of love. Like, I care about them
and I
that
love that.
much.
I love that.
That I want, like, I don't want to rip you off by not giving you the feedback that, hey, you are not taking care of yourself right now. And so I think that is one of the things that we talk about in wellness with my clients. And then even me, because again, right, like my clients, I didn't even notice, but they were having, doubts and, oh, well, what happens if I actually lose all this weight? What happens if I actually get the date? All these things. I think it all stemmed from a place of self-worth. And so I personally went on my own self-discovery journey and recognizing, well, why is it so challenging for me to take a compliment, right? Or why can't I actually picture myself as this elite athlete at that time, right? And it was like I didn't even deserve that goal. I didn't observe that end game. I didn't deserve that final ultimate result because I wasn't worthy enough. I didn't love myself enough, I didn't think that the type of people that I was surrounding myself with were even able to see that in me either. And so I was basically just creating this environment where I was loading myself up with a lack of self-worth, right? So I needed to change my internal conversation. I needed to redesign and reinvent my internal relationship of self-worth and loving myself in order to also, again, provide that feedback for other people, because we don't know what we don't know, right?
I guess one of the questions I have then, and this is something that, we struggle with too, is how do you have that balance between, okay, we're going to give you self-worth, but we're also saying you're not where you want to be. You understand what I'm saying?
Because we run into a lot, people will, especially guys do it a lot. They'll come to us and they'll say, I want this. But then when we tell them that it requires some fundamental change, they accuse us of, well, I'm not changing for anybody.
Well, and too, if it is a self-worth issue, which I agree, then they probably have not been told that they're worth much at different times in their life. But yet you're still trying to get them to, I guess, accept themselves, but also become their best self. You know what I'm saying? How do you balance that?
Well, I think it's again going back to the place of, like, they're not necessarily resisting you when they're responding in that way. Like, they're resisting themselves and they're judging themselves, and they're not willing to look in the mirror, right? Because again, they're taking it personally as opposed to neutral. And oh, okay, cool. These guys freaking care about me enough to let me know that I'm not doing the things that are going to attract the love of my life.
Right.
I'm not doing the things that are going to bring forth my highest level of wellness. You know what I mean? And so I think just simply letting that other person know that, like, this is coming from a place of love, and I'm not judging you, and it's okay, and you don't have to defend yourself. Trust me, like, I wouldn't be here caring about you if I didn't trust you, right? Like, I trust that you can do this. Like, I believe in you, right? And so I think moving forward with anyone, getting that clear first is going to be massively supportive. And then I think it's also too of letting them know of exactly how they're showing up right now in that moment. So it's like, okay, cool. So you have now the opportunity to either continuously keep doing the same things that you're going to do, or you can choose responsibility. Stop playing the victim card, because again, it's a victim. It's like, this is happening to me. Right. Like, everything is against me. Like, it's snowing, it's raining outside, I'm not going to go and run, or, the movie is sold out, so we're not going to go on a date. Whatever it is, right? Like, total victim to everything.
Or I can't get a date in this town if I just move towns. We've heard that.
We've
even heard countries.
We've even heard different time periods. If only I lived in the Middle Ages, women would appreciate it.
Wow.
So
that's probably new one, right?
I haven't heard that one. That's incredible.
So, like, in the Middle Ages, they appreciated a gentleman. Something like that. You know.
And I think it's also then going back to, like, this is even on a deeper level of, like, self-worth, right? So if you don't see yourself as worthy, then you're only going to attract what your level of frequency is at. You know what I mean? Like, we're all energy. So if you're thinking and showing up and, like, presenting yourself in a certain way, that level, and again, it's not a place of judgment, it's just like that level of people who resonate at that level of energy are only going to be attracted to that, right? It's physics. Like energy attracts like energy.
That is awesome that you bring that up, because the next question I was going to ask you, we deal with it.
This is perfect.
Like attracts like.
Of course.
Because we see a lot of guys and women, some, who they have this checklist of these amazing traits they want in a partner. But then you look at them and their lack of accomplishments or their mindset, and we ask, well, what do you bring to the table? And a lot of people don't say in relationships, you know what, I'm going to be amazing so that I can attract someone amazing. It's more, I want someone amazing. And then when we say, what have you done about it? Their answer is nothing. And the question I want to ask you is, how has pursuing excellence positively impacted your relationship
Yeah.
with others? I mean, it can be friendships, romantic,
Right.
or even some of the clients you work with.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful, all-encompassing question. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So, I think going back to everything that we were talking about is knowing that I deserve that. And so, if that's truly what I want, then my vision, my passion, my goals need to be bigger than my fear.
Great way to put it.
And it's like that simple too, right? And what I recognized is when I wanted to, redesign and reinvent my our relationship with each other, right? Like, I hadn't seen a little bit of vulnerability for your audience and everything, which I would love to speak into that a little bit too. I think
Sure, go for it.
huge.
Yeah, speak to
But,
vulnerability. Absolutely.
So I hadn't seen my father for 19 years, pretty much 20, approximately 20 years, right? And so I recognized, like, I wanted that. I wanted some sort of connection from my father. And mind you, it's not necessarily, it doesn't look like everybody else's relationship, but it's much different than what it ever was, right? And so taking that of, okay, well, am I going to live in the fear of, well, I'm afraid of what he's going to say, or is he even going to answer, and all these other things. I had to switch my internal conversation of, like, no, I'm not going to judge him. I'm not going to be angry or resentful or shameful, right? Like, oh, well, I don't know what you've been doing your entire life. Like, you haven't seen your son. I'm not going to talk to him, right?
Right.
So I needed to change my internal conversation. And so once I changed my internal conversation, it allowed me to open up to new possibilities. So I think that's moving forward on how I was able to recognize of, okay, well, cool, this is how I can now create excellence in every other relationship in my life, is if I set down judgment, right? 'Cause we all have judgment.
Yep.
That's how we grow.
Yes.
It's
true.
a comparison thing, right? And though too, it's not like I'm better than you though, right? Like, we're all equal. I'm just operating at a different frequency, and you're creating these results, and, like, that's cool and that's awesome, And so I recognize that my level of excellence, right? If somebody was like, yeah, I've seen my father every single day for my entire life, like, that's awesome, and I'm not going to compare myself to their relationship. You know what I mean? So for me, my level of excellence is going to look different than everybody else. And I think that right there alone is what is, like, the juice to it all.
Right.
And the energy is, like, my level of excellence for my girlfriend and I, for my family, for my clients and them. Like, I can see what's possible, but if I don't look at it from a place of neutrality, and I'm not trying to compare or, like, one up somebody, like, oh, hey, I got my dad back, or, like, hey, I got the love of my life. How about you? Oh, you don't?
Right.
If I take just a place of total neutrality and I'm doing this for me and me alone, and I'm not trying to prove myself or anything, I think that's what true excellence is because, again, going back to the whole definition, it's my definition, and, like, if they see excellence as mediocrity, well, how can you also inspire somebody, right? How can you inspire them? I think going back to even, like, clients and, even in relationships, what's going to make you want to wake up to the person next to you every single day? What's going to inspire you to want to go to the gym, right? And it's like the long-term game. So I think excellence is also not comparing yourself, but also to other people, but saying, okay, cool, this is where I'm at, and where do I want to be, right? Like, what's the end game? What's the big vision, right? Like, I saw what a true, beautiful relationship was with my great-grandparents, right? And they were loving and caring and kind and sincere and empathetic, and they talked things out, And so that's what I saw as excellence. So I can aspire to be like them, but I get to still live in my own source of inspiration and my own level of excellence and not compare still though, right? Like I'm not trying to be better than them, but I still see what's possible. And so that's where I've taken my relationships, and that's where I also then share with my clients is what's going to truly inspire you to live in excellence every single day, because it's a choice. It's not like, oh, I'm in excellence, you know, and like you just put on your excellence suit.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's not always there. You have to choose it.
That is really awesome, man. I really appreciate you sharing that story.
There's a mic, you could drop it right now.
That's right.
How amazing
I mean,
that was.
yeah.
But don't drop it because the equipment's kind of expensive. But
There's the story about your dad and even your great-grandparents is just amazing, because it's like you get to this crossroads and you can choose to be a victim or you can choose to be excellent. You know, you chose, you could have easily been a victim with your situation with your dad, but you chose to be vulnerable and chose a much better path. Even on the everyday level, like your grandparents. A lot of people, when they fight with their significant other, they choose to go off in a corner, pout, give the silent treatment. After 5 hours, they won't talk about it, and they're suddenly fine again until it happens 2 days later. But by choosing to talk and work it out, they chose not to be a victim and chose the excellent path. And that is very inspiring.
We mentioned the self-talk, and that's something we hammer a lot, is that it's not necessarily outside events that impact what happens. It's how you react to those events. A lot of people could look at your situation and have every one of those negative thoughts about your dad. You know, what was he doing? I'm going to yell at him. I'm going to make him feel guilty.
Yeah.
But, you know, you shifted your thoughts, and just changing your perspective made the situation so much better. Right. That's a real lesson there. Yeah. Now, I want to talk about vulnerability briefly, because you did mention that.
Yeah,
okay,
for sure.
A lot of guys, I think, in particular, that we don't like the vulnerability word, because we associate, that means I have to cry when I don't feel like crying, or I have to share my feelings when I have shared my feelings. You know, I've been told to be more vulnerable sometimes. I've literally shared every bit of my feelings in the way that I share them, but I've been told I didn't, like, you know, have a tear streaming down my eye or something like that. But I think true vulnerability isn't that at all. It's not emotionalism. It's something deeper than that. So how would you define vulnerability?
That's awesome. Vulnerability to me is speaking your truth.
Okay, excellent.
Right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that everything's hunky-dory, right? Again, right? Like, excellence is a choice. You know what I mean? But I'm also not going to fall victim to my circumstances. You know, if I see something not working in my relationship, I'm going to take ownership for it. I'm going to choose responsibility, and I'm going to say, hey, hun, like, this is my experience of you, and give feedback. Yeah. You know, and we're at a great place where she understands that it's coming from like a place of love, and she stands in just total neutrality and everything too, which is beautiful. But we had to get to that point because we had to both choose vulnerability. So I think, in response to even like what you're talking about, is, you know, when somebody says, oh, well, you didn't shed a tear, so that's not being vulnerable. So the opportunity comes up for that person to check in with their own vulnerability.
Interesting.
I think it's like a two-way street.
Answer.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like vulnerability starts with your truth, and again, like their feedback of, oh, well, you didn't cry, so you're not being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And though, I can tell you from the bottom of my heart, I'm being vulnerable, and I don't need to cry. I don't have to cry in order to be vulnerable. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that my life was rainbows and butterflies and unicorns, right? Like, yeah, there was challenges growing up in a single parent household with an absentee father, right? And that's me being vulnerable, and of course I've shed my tears before. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, we're not saying guys can't cry or anything. Absolutely not. Yeah, but
and though too, right? Like, I think it also comes from a place of a victim sometimes, right? Like, if it's again coming from like the place of like it's happening to me, so I'm going to cry because I'm sad and X, Y, and Z, right? As opposed to like, no, I'm going to stand in this and be vulnerable and speak my truth because it doesn't have power over me.
Right.
I think that's another place that our audiences could look at as well, is that vulnerability. Again, you choose it, you speak your truth, and then again, vulnerability, just like excellence, is going to look different to everybody. And giving them that space to be vulnerable and just share without the judgment is also a huge thing. Because again, like, oh, we have to cry. Like, that's judgment.
Right.
You know what I mean? So if we take it out, all of it, and just speak our truths, I think that creates vulnerability.
When you're doing, I mean, as you were mentioning, you want to talk about vulnerability. I'm just thinking of what you're doing right now is quintessential vulnerability. I mean, you're sharing your truth, you're speaking it boldly, you're enthusiastic about it, you're putting it all out there. There are going to be people that might judge what you say, disagree with what you say. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Mark Manson, the author. He talks about vulnerability a lot in his books, and he really redefined vulnerability when I read some of his books. Just I used to, like I said, think it was more kind of emotional, like, or being like emotional in a like crying or showing emotion, but it's more just kind of like you said, just being who you are and standing up for that and being willing to put yourself out there.
Doesn't he use the word non-needy?
Yeah, I think he says you're vulnerable. You need to be non-needy.
Meaning you're independent and you speak your truth. You're not concerned with what other people think. You do what's right.
So in a way, me, and I know this is kind of half joking, but me, like when I would bring like my healthy lunches to work that everyone else made fun of. I mean, they were just jokingly making fun of them, but it wasn't a way being vulnerable. It's like, hey, I'm putting my food choices out here, and yes, it's a packet of weighed out almonds and salad, but this is who I am and kind of what I'm doing. One time I did mix a fish oil tablet in with it by accident, bit down thinking it was almond. It was fish oil. It was awful.
That was very probably deserved to laugh.
Yeah, they did.
And then everybody's just stayed away.
Yeah, I'm like, because I smell like fish, I think, the rest of the day. But so related to that, speaking of really shifting to diet here, what do you recommend in terms of like let's get on to the more physical side of things. So the diet and exercise, what would you just basically recommend if someone says, you know what, I'm inspired, I do want to lose those extra pounds, I want to get in shape,
right? What
would you recommend?
Simple. So to make sure that everybody's on a clear page out there, right? So macronutrients, big energy sources that are going to make up majority of your meals are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, right? So every meal, I recommend having a source of each of those.
Okay.
And typically, if they're well-rounded, right, like you've got your vegetables as your carbs, you've got your almonds as your fat source, and then you've got like some source of protein. Traditionally, it's like chicken or fish or eggs, whatever it is, right, steak. That's what I'm going to consider a full meal.
Okay.
I typically tell people to avoid a snack. Just make that a meal. So a lot of people say, oh, well, I'm going to have almonds as my snack.
Okay.
Well, yes, that's a superfood and it has all of it, but you also, depending on their level of training, need more calories than what they're typically consuming. A lot of people think of like, oh, well, I want to lose weight, so I'm going to consume less calories. But typically, in my experience with the clients that I've worked with, is that they've been in a caloric deficit for so long, it's like their body thinks they're in hibernation. So they're just conserving all their energy because it's afraid to die. The body doesn't want to die, right? It's constantly in a feedback loop of like, okay, this is working, this isn't working. I'm going to release more hormones. I'm going to hold back on them, all of it, right?
Right.
So I just simply tell everybody, make sure you have at least the 3 meals, of course, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But though too, if you're hungry, like add the 4th meal. Like don't avoid it. Of like, oh well, I don't want to eat past 7. Well, just have a full meal, and don't make it like a snack of ice cream and chips. Like you can have your meal. Like your body is telling you that it's hungry. Listen to it, right? Like I'm thirsty. This is a jug of water, right? So like I'm naturally going to just answer my body's call of like, Vinny, you're thirsty. You should probably drink some water now. You know what I mean?
Is that just water? It looks blue.
The bottle is blue.
Oh, okay. I thought the way
I've got some BCAAs in there.
Okay, I was going to say, it looks like BCAAs.
Acids.
Yes, we're familiar with that. Yes.
So simply put, that's what I would recommend. And then also to any other dietary supplement needs, right? So I'm not a registered dietitian, and I make that super, super clear. So consult with your doctor and say, hey, this is what a potential meal plan is going to look like for me. Does this align with like your principles and all of that stuff? If they approve, awesome, cool. Like, let's do that then. If they have to take medications, I always recommend make sure you consult with your doctor before changing your lifestyle. And so the big thing too is that anybody out there listening, you're not going to go on a diet. Don't go on a diet. You're not going on a diet. Whatever you're consuming right now is your diet, and you might make modifications or you might change it, but anything and everything that you consume is technically your diet. Like, the word diet has been just battered, and it has like this negative connotation. And so to make sure that people understand even what the diet is, it's just a nutrition lifestyle. Like, what are you eating on a regular basis that is going to fuel your body, give yourself the energy? And the other thing too, if we're talking about going back to like self-worth, and it's like a total cliche because we hear it all the time, but are you going to put bumper stickers, and are you going to put like low grade fuel in a Ferrari? You know what I mean? Like, and like, are you going to put low test grade fuel or oil, like all of it, right? Thinking of it in that sense. Are you going to put processed foods in your body? You know, and don't get me wrong, yes, of course, like BCAAs are technically lab designed and everything like that, but I trust them, you know what I mean? So I've done my research, and I've found out that it's not going to influence me. It's not going to negatively affect me. So anybody out there looking to just make instant impacts in their nutrition and their health, avoid processed foods. Just avoid it. Like, if it doesn't grow on a tree, like cheese, doesn't grow on a tree. You know, bread, yes, wheat and all of those other things grow on a tree, but like, if anybody has read the Whole30, that's a typical big book that everybody likes to reference and everything, so I just point them in that direction. But taking into consideration, the human body wasn't meant to digest grain. Like, there's a reason why cows digest grain with 6 stomachs, right? And then humans have 1 stomach, and we digest it at the rate that we do. Like corn, right? We shouldn't probably be eating corn. Like, if you eat corn, anybody out there, right? We're going to be totally vulnerable. Yeah. You know, if you eat corn, it probably doesn't digest well.
I think we have evidence. Anyone who's ever eaten it knows that.
So
more vulnerability
again, right? Like, avoiding consuming those types of foods too.
Great. And you know, we I think I've always thought corn oil was bizarre. You know, we're taking oil from something. It's not even that oily, and then also, you know, we're taking soybeans and getting oil from them. And I mean, so we've actually been more on. We've been getting into intermittent fasting lately, actually. So eating fewer meals, but we don't have time to discuss all the dynamics behind this, but we've seen the difference in our life. Like, you eat better, you feel better, you look better. From an attraction standpoint, you have more energy. You get out there, and really and even in terms of what we talk about a lot is obesity in men contributes to lower testosterone, which lowers your drive. Testosterone 100%. Low testosterone is associated with lower overall motivation. I mean, so it creates I think a lot of us think our bodies are separate from our minds. Like, there's this big distinction when it's not, you know. If you're eating like 4 donuts and, you know, you're on a carb binge, and, you know, you're washing down a couple donuts and a piece of pizza with, you know, some Coke. I mean, that will impact your body, your brain, the insulin going up, the blood sugar. I mean, you will experience brain fog, and your mind's going to suffer. The two are not separate.
100%. Yeah, for sure. I think really quick to speak into that, even just like making sure that people are valuing themselves. You know, just hands down, it's just valuing themselves. You know, like, you guys value what you can do with your bodies, right? Going back to gratitude. Like, I'm super grateful that we're in a country where healthy food is even available.
That's right.
Right?
Good point,
so it's almost like negligence, right? Like, if you're neglecting your body and you're not giving it the fuel that it needs, right? You're not falling back in gratitude. You're basically choosing to plead negligence to your health.
Right.
Right? And so, again, if we're talking about energy, and we're talking about self-worth and all of these things, right? Like, you're just going to be naturally attracted or attracting those types of people and those sorts of results in your life based off of, again, anything and everything that you're consuming in your internal environment, which then you also provide out externally as well.
Very well put.
Yeah.
And we absolutely agree with the whole, the mind-body connection. You got to treat them both properly, and your life will get better.
Yep.
Well, we are about out of time, and we really
Amazing.
appreciate
Oh
having you on.
It was
Amazing.
awesome.
No,
Amazing.
we absolutely loved having you on.
Now,
You can tell.
before we go though,
Okay.
why don't you give the listeners your website in case they want to hit you up,
for sure,
a way
for
to
sure.
get a hold of you.
Yeah. So actually, in my experience of what's just been working, I refer everybody just to my Facebook page.
Okay.
So Vinnie Dangerfield, my personal coaching business. So my fitness and mindset coaching business is Mesomorphics. So that's MEZOMORPHX.
Okay.
So it's the body type, mesomorph.
Okay.
Right. So Mesomorphics stands for more muscular effects.
Oh,
That's
good.
an awesome
Excellent.
name.
Excellent.
Mesomorphics. And then my Instagram and Twitter handle are VDangerF.
Okay. Well, great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, be sure to check out Vinny's the website, his Instagram, his services. He's a great guy, and we are really glad to have you on. We
Yes.
appreciate
Thank you so
coming.
much.
Thank you guys.
And thank
This was
you guys.
incredible.
Thank everyone for listening, and
Thank
we
you,
will
guys.
see you next episode.